One of the biggest details that changes the way you see Casino is the fact that Sam Ace Rothstein was not simply a character invented by Martin Scorsese. He was primarily based on Frank Lefty Rosenthal, a real professional gambler and casino executive who became deeply involved in the Las Vegas gambling industry during the period when organized crime had enormous influence over the city. Rosenthal was not a traditional gangster in the way Nicky Santoro was. His greatest weapon was his knowledge of gambling, mathematics, sports betting, and casino operations. He understood exactly how a casino made money, how employees should be managed, how gamblers should be treated, and how even tiny mistakes could cost the house enormous amounts of money. That is why Ace spends so much time obsessing over details that seem almost ridiculous. He worries about food, dealers, employees, gamblers, security, entertainment, and even the smallest operational mistakes. To someone who does not understand the real story, Ace can look almost neurotic. But once you know about Rosenthal, his behavior makes much more sense. His job was not to walk around Las Vegas threatening people. His job was to make the casino function as efficiently as possible while keeping the criminal operation hidden behind a legitimate business. Rosenthal was associated with several real Las Vegas casinos, including the Stardust, and the fictional Tangiers casino combines elements of those real properties. What makes this especially interesting is that Rosenthal's influence existed in an awkward space between the legitimate casino industry and organized crime. He could have enormous influence over how a casino operated while still being viewed with suspicion by Nevada authorities. That contradiction is exactly what makes Ace such a fascinating character. He is intelligent enough to understand that the casino must look completely legitimate, but he is surrounded by people who constantly threaten to expose the criminal world underneath it. Joe Pesci's Nicky Santoro is one of the most memorable characters in Casino, but what makes him even more disturbing is the fact that he was based on Anthony "Tony the Ant" Spilotro, a real Chicago mobster who was sent to Las Vegas to protect the organization's interests. Spilotro had a reputation for extreme violence, and his activities eventually went far beyond simply protecting the casinos. Like Nicky in the movie, he became involved with his own criminal network, and gradually became increasingly difficult for the people above him to control. This is one of the most important differences between Ace and Nicky. Ace understands that the casino is supposed to appear legitimate. He knows that too much violence will attract police, investigators, journalists, and federal authorities. Nicky doesn't care about any of that. He believes that if people are afraid of him, they will respect him. And if they respect him, he can do whatever he wants. At first, this makes him incredibly useful. When someone refuses to cooperate, Nicky knows exactly how to make that person change their mind. But eventually, the same quality that makes Nicky valuable becomes the reason he becomes dangerous. He attracts too much attention, creates too many enemies, and begins acting as though the entire organization exists for him personally. The real Spilotro faced a similar problem. He became so notorious that his presence in Las Vegas created enormous risks for the organization. That is why Nicky's downfall feels inevitable when you understand the real history. He believes that becoming feared makes him untouchable, but organized crime has a completely different rule. Nobody is indispensable. The people who give you power can also decide when you have become too dangerous to keep alive. The Tangiers is one of the most important locations in Casino, but there was never a real Las Vegas casino operating exactly like the one shown in the movie. Instead, the Tangiers was largely inspired by several real properties, especially the Stardust, which played a major role in the history behind the film. Frank Rosenthal was closely associated with the Stardust, and the casino became deeply connected to the organized crime-controlled gambling system that existed in Las Vegas during this era. Scorsese even leaves subtle clues for viewers who know the history. The song Stardust appears during important moments in the movie, including Ace and Ginger's wedding. That is not an accidental choice. The fictional Tangiers is essentially a cinematic version of the real world surrounding casinos like the Stardust. The important thing is that Scorsese did not want the casino to feel like a simple movie set. He wanted it to feel like an enormous machine that was constantly producing money. Thousands of customers could walk through the doors every day without having any idea what was happening behind the scenes. Gamblers saw bright lights, beautiful decorations, dealers, entertainment, and expensive restaurants. Behind the walls, however, there were counting rooms, security operations, employees handling enormous amounts of cash, and people whose job was to make sure that certain money never appeared in the official books. That contrast between the glamorous casino floor and the criminal operation hidden underneath it is one of the main ideas of the entire movie. The Tangiers may be fictional, but the system it represents was very real. One of the darkest details in Casino is the way organized crime actually made money from the casinos. It wasn't simply a matter of someone walking into the building and stealing cash. The real operation was much more sophisticated. Money could be secretly removed from casino revenues before the amount was officially recorded, allowing criminals to take millions without immediately creating an obvious hole in the books. This process became known as skimming, and it was one of the central elements of the real Las Vegas scandal that inspired Casino. The casino could appear completely legitimate to the public while a second financial system operated underneath it. Customers would gamble, the casino would collect money, and employees would process the cash, but some of that money could disappear before the official accounting records were completed. This is what makes the story so fascinating from a psychological perspective. The average gambler had absolutely no idea what was happening. Someone could sit down at a blackjack table, lose $5,000, walk out of the casino, and never realize that the money was entering a system in which criminals were secretly taking their share before the casino officially reported its revenue. The operation depended on secrecy. That meant the people involved had to be extremely careful about who knew what. Every employee who handled money became important. Every accounting mistake could potentially expose the operation. Every person who became suspicious could become a problem. Suddenly, Ace's obsession with control makes perfect sense. He isn't just trying to run a successful casino. He's trying to keep an enormous criminal financial system operating without attracting the attention of the government. Another detail that seems like pure movie drama was actually connected to Frank Rosenthal's real life. In Casino, Ace Rothstein is incredibly successful at running the casino, yet his relationship with Nevada gaming authorities becomes a serious problem because of his background and connections. The real Rosenthal faced similar difficulties. His connections to organized crime and his history created serious questions about whether he should be officially licensed to operate within Nevada's gaming industry. This created an extraordinary contradiction. The people behind the casino considered his knowledge extremely valuable, while the authorities had serious reasons to question whether someone with his background should have such influence over a major gambling operation. This situation reveals something important about how organized crime operated in Las Vegas. The criminals didn't necessarily need to officially own everything themselves. They could influence businesses through people who understood the industry while maintaining enough distance to make the operation appear legitimate. That is why Ace is so frustrated throughout the movie. From his perspective, he knows he can run the casino better than almost anyone else. He understands gambling, he understands customers, and he understands how to make money. But the authorities aren't simply asking whether he is good at running a casino. They're asking who he knows, where he came from, and whether his connections create a threat to the integrity of the gaming industry. In other words, Ace's intelligence cannot solve the problem because the problem isn't mathematical. It's political, legal, and criminal. 6. The car bombing really happened, and Frank Rosenthal survived it. One of the most unbelievable scenes in Casino happens when Ace gets into his car and suddenly the vehicle explodes. It looks exactly like the kind of exaggerated moment that Hollywood would create to make a gangster movie more exciting. The incredible part is that Frank Rosenthal really did survive a car bombing in Las Vegas in 1982. The real attack was extremely serious, and Rosenthal was fortunate to survive. One of the most famous details surrounding the incident is that the construction of his vehicle may have helped protect him from the explosion. The car's design and the metal beneath the driver's seat have been credited with reducing the impact on Rosenthal, although the exact circumstances have been discussed and debated over the years. The movie uses the bombing as a dramatic turning point, because it demonstrates that Ace's world has become so dangerous that someone is willing to kill him simply to remove him from the picture. But there is an important difference between the film and reality. The movie strongly connects the bombing to Nicky Santoro, while the real identity of whoever ordered the attack was never established with the same certainty shown in the film. This is a perfect example of how Scorsese approached the real history. He took something that genuinely happened and incorporated it into a dramatic narrative where every event has a clear connection to the characters. The bombing was real, but the movie's explanation of it is part of the fictionalized story.